Hello, how's it? Shalom, good evening. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Okay, I think most of us got a chance to watch good old Cyril. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I find it incredibly hilarious because what the fudge did he just say to us? Any of you guys know? Maybe? Any of you guys can assist in letting us know exactly what the president said tonight. You know, it's yo people, yo. This country seriously has a lack of leadership. It's insane. It's insane what South Africans have come to have to put up with. It really is insane. Like we've gotten to a point where and I laugh because the comments were incredibly funny in the run-up to this. People saying things like, "No, I'm actually going to spend time clipping my toenails," or, I'm going to play some Dragon Ball Z. I mean, there's some weird comments that played out in the run-up to this entire thing, because it's one thing's become incredibly clear: this country is absolutely fed up with the nature in which the current ruling elite in this country, and it's not just the ANC. It's not just the ANC. I've got to actually make that crystal clear. It's not just the ANC. It's the entire political elite in this country. It lacks political diversity. It lacks imagination. And there is a critical lack of leadership in South Africa. A critical lack of leadership. And we've been having this conversation, I suppose, on the show, right? I mean, you guys know, if you knew anything about what you were going to expect tonight from me, it would be perhaps a revisit of these issues. But tonight, we're going to have a different conversation, or a conversation in addition to some of the points we often talk about. I want Vlog 40 to be a conversation of those who join this vlog. I know it's quite late. What is it? It's 10:15. And I know people are, probably in bed already, especially given the damp squib that was the president's address. But I want to have a quick 15-minute chat. It genuinely will be 15 minutes on this vlog, where I just want to give my quick initial thoughts around the absolute clown world and the shenanigans of the lack of leadership that we endure, that we continue to put up with in South Africa, and then begin a conversation. Begin it. I want to lay a small seed, and I'm hoping we'll develop it further in other conversations. I want to lay a small seed of what exactly our response should now be to the ANC and to the political elites in this country. What should that response actually now really be in real terms? So we're going to have that brief conversation tonight as a good night message. Let me call it a good night message, if anything else. I'm hearing the sound is crystal clear. I know there are a lot of complaints from yesterday's show about the nature of the sound. So maybe as I keep an eye on the comments, you guys will let me know if the sound is absolutely crystal clear. And welcome to everybody. I'm seeing you guys come through. Heinz Strubel, by donkey for the boodskap. Thanks for the message. Sounds good. Okay, cool. Guys, thanks a million. Oh, sorry about the look. It might be a bit more regular, as I often say to people, I don't call me black, I'm Zulu. I've got a culture, I've got a language, proudly so, I've got a history, and my history is one of a conquering nation, one which literally marched through the plains of Natal and vast parts of this country in a conquering fashion. So there's nothing about my culture and my being Zulu which speaks to me being a victim in any way. That's why I hate this idea of being called black, because if you listen to how people describe black and blackness, as they say, it's steeped in victimhood. It's steeped in victimhood, and I reject that. It's absolute nonsense. There's nothing about me and my being proudly Zulu that has anything to do with victimhood. So you just caught me this evening as I was finished. I was actually, to be brutally honest, I was actually practicing some Zulu dance moves. There's a special let's call it mini-series that I'll be shooting in South African hostels, which have been traditionally a space where Zulu migrant labor was brought into the inner cities. And hostels have a history, I suppose, and what's the word I'm looking for? I thought of this sentence in Zulu. Hostels have a reputation for being these violent places. And we don't really know much about who lives in these hostels. So I've been brushing up on my Zulu dancing or ingamu and ukita as I prepare for this upcoming mini documentary. But guys, let's get straight into the conversation tonight. The address tonight by the president basically was a whole bunch of nothing. It was waffle. And in reality, it was him appearing before our screens in order to pacify people who, if anything, hold political clout that he needs, and politically for him, that is, within the ANC tripartite alliance. And it had very little to do with actually what the country needs in this entire process of fighting COVID-19, the guys, of course, but in reality, extending their powers in a formal government sense through the lockdown. So it had everything to do with politics and very little to do with us, the citizens. What do I mean by this? Well, in reality, who he was pacifying today are union bosses who literally had probably at some stage marched into Luthuli House and said, listen, if you do not start listening to us and returning our soft power within the formal echelons of the state, i.e. the Department of Education and within the schooling system in this entire country, those union bosses, the likes of the likes of SATU, the South African Democratic Teachers Union, and other ANC-aligned unions, probably basically, they drew their red line, so to speak, in the sand. And they said, why are our members back at work? Why are we back at, why are our teachers, back in the classroom when they face the threat of COVID-19? Look at how our teachers are dying left, right, and center, they probably would have said to the ANC. And if your president, this is the unions to the ANC, doesn't accede to our demands to basically shut down schooling and return our teachers back at home so they can be safe, of course, with a full salary, because that's how unions would have pitched it to the ANC, then they would have argued, and I'm positing that this is what would have happened. I would likely assume they would have said, we're not going to support Cyril and his gaggle at any future elective conference. I have a full feeling that tonight's decision had everything to do with politics and very little to do with the guise that was being sold to us of, we need to protect the teachers, the learners, and the educators, if I'm to quote Cyril directly. So there you have it. You now have a situation where, and I've said this before, ironically, right? I've said this before on the show. If you don't stand up for your interests as an interest grouping, whoever you are, whether I like you or not, then you're not going to be respected by politicians. And kudos to SATU, irksome as they are, annoying as they are. Kudos to SATU. They stood up and they said, hey man, if you don't accede to our demands, this and this and this and this will happen to you. And I can assure you that's likely what happened. That's likely what happened. So that all the waffle you heard from Cyril Ramaphosa tonight about, after consultation with this stakeholder and that stakeholder, it's probably bullcrap. It's probably really bullcrap. In reality, they had to find any excuse to basically accede to the demands of unions. Now, this is why I began this vlog by basically saying, the lack of political diversity and the lack of political leadership cuts across political lines, not just the ANC, because watch what will happen now. There will be a line of politicians, often the power-hungry ones, the ones who maybe even are left in the cold. I'm thinking Musi Maimane in particular, with his One South Africa movement, basically the beginnings of a political party, who are now going to come out and say, yeah, hey man, this is fantastic. We've been saying for a long time that we need to shut down the schools. Yo, I'm not surprised. I am not surprised the DA dropped him like a hot cake. Albeit he's like, oh, I left. I'm not surprised because it's been asinine politicians who have been saying things like, oh, there is a massive danger to school kids. There is a massive danger. Oh, we're going to see a rise in infections. Guys, it's bullcrap. It's bullcrap. I know as I say this, there are parents watching, and maybe some of you even support this decision, but the cold, hard reality of the matter is the data shows us that children are not, they're poor transmitters of the virus, as we now know, and really they're not the ones who are going to be dying from this. Yeah, look, I see a buffering symbol, so I don't know if I'm on. So I think I am on. So yeah, I mean that's my initial thoughts, guys. My initial thoughts. Like, this decision had nothing to do with you. It had nothing to do with protecting the children or whatever the case may be. It was all politics. It was a Cyril Ramaphosa who was quite literally doing the political calculations and saying, yeah, the way things are going right now, if we're not careful, we cannot risk alienating what little friends we do have. Because I can tell you now, a lot of the politicians in the ANC are beginning to do the political calculations of what a post-COVID, or rather a post-lockdown political landscape looks like, especially with the amount of anger that they've roused up in society. The ANC has wasted all of the goodwill that it had when it entered this lockdown. So now all it is, and all we'll see from now basically to about mid-August, because I think that's what the ANC seems to be budgeting for. If I listen to the language, if I listen to the rhetoric, it seems as though there likely will be either a moving down to level 2, or some sort of release of pressure mid-August. That seems to be what they're budgeting for. Because I think they're looking at this and they're thinking, guys, this is now becoming political suicide. For as much as you want to say anything about the ANC, they're not that dumb politically. They know their audience, basically. And when you begin to see poor people in this country voicing open dissent, and basically the will and the consent to be governed by the ANC quickly eroding, even amongst poor people who are seen often as the base of the ANC, that should tell you everything you need to know about the warning bells and warning signs that the ANC likely see themselves. What do I mean, Big Daddy? Let me be precise and specific. If you see the amount of videos that are circling on social media of the unrest across this country, now, of course, there's always unrest in South Africa, but in this instance, I can almost bet my bottom dollar that the vast majority of it is not organized by even within the ANC, even in various factions of the ANC. What you're beginning to see is more and more organic, almost ground-led resistance to the national government and really the ANC government by and large. That's what you're beginning to see. It no longer is a case of different vested interest groups within the ANC who are vying for power, who basically mobilize and use people for their own nefarious agenda. What I'm beginning to pick up, and I'm sort of even hearing chatter around this, is ordinary people on the ground saying, you know what, enough's enough. Enough is actually enough. And the ANC are not stupid, guys. They're going to look at this and they're going to go, yeah, we need to do something real quick. Even if it means buying people. That's why you're beginning to see a concerted shift to the left by the ANC, insofar as basically advocating for openly a welfare state. I mean, we've always been an iteration of a welfare state, but historically we've looked to, I'm not saying it's been perfect either, but I'm just saying historically, there's been a fine balance in the ANC where they've said, look, we're going to be a welfare state, but we're going to tax that money from productive enterprise or white monopoly capital, they've said. That's been the sort of fine balance they've played. But now the ANC have dropped all illusion of that. And now they're basically saying, you know what, even if we beg, borrow, and steal, we are going to run up deficits if we need to. We're going to disregard junk statuses if we have to. We are literally going to bribe South Africans in every way possible. And that means shifting further to the left. So what does that mean in real terms for you and me? Because I know you guys are woke, so to speak. I've been warning you about this. there's going to be territory that they now encroach on. Number one, running up runaway deficits. Runaway deficits. They're not even going to give a flying fudge about the debt in this country. And we're kind of already seeing that, where there's only a few voices who are sounding the alarm bells around this. Recently, in fact, the deputy finance minister in this country literally said, hey, what's wrong with running the printing presses at the Reserve Bank? Let's just print more money, he said. Dumbass. Anyway, but in any event, running up deficits, basically spending to the hilt in order to basically finance more and more welfare. Which brings me to number two, where we're heading politically, more welfare. Essentially, more avenues, more means of bribing and buying the patronage, if you will, of poorer South Africans. Listen to the asinine ideas that are being floated around already. Things like a universal income grant, basically paying you for being unemployed. The ANC have given up on the idea of essentially creating a growing market economy, a growing economy that absorbs people in productive employment. Now it's purely the game of how many votes can we buy and how much welfare can we dole out to society to buy our page, or rather to keep our base happy. And the last area, this is a dangerous one, the last area that signifies a firm shift towards the left, a firm shift towards a socialist, more welfare type society, is literally the erosion of private property rights. The absolute erosion of private property rights, specifically going after people's ownership of their pensions. Your pension is now firmly in the crosshairs of the ANC. You will hear more and more a conversation around, what does it harm? What does it hurt, they'll say, to basically take pension money. It's money, right? It's sitting there. It's a pot of money. And it's South African, right? So do the patriotic thing, they'll argue. Give us a portion of your pension for us to invest it into social welfare and social programs. Or the refuge of most of these politicians, to invest it in infrastructure that'll grow the economy. Bull stuff. Trying not to swear. Your pension will be top of mind. At a local government level, what do you mean? Expropriation without compensation will take a very interesting meaning. It'll basically see local governments, municipalities, empowering themselves through their officials to be able to confiscate properties. So you might find a situation, for example, where a derelict building that's been standing for a while, expropriate that and then sell it off as the state. What's that? You're behind on your property rates and all those fees, expropriate that and sell it off. And those funds, good luck them coming to you, because you would have established the precedent that the state decides how much compensation you get, with zero being an option in their book. Again, this sounds like hyperbole, but I've been warning you guys for a very long time. You knew, and I told you what trends to start spotting for you to know where this is going to go. In fact, we had this conversation quite a while back, if I'm to be brutally honest, where I said the ANC realizes that they've lost the debate on the idea of controlling the entire society via hard lockdown. They realized that quite early, that they've lost that debate. And what they're going to do now is retreat into territory where basically they think they've got the higher ground. And those are issues, for example, of the prohibition of alcohol and cigarettes. Because in their view, they look at that and they think, yeah, we can defend that in a society. And that can buy us brownie points with people. And then from that, they then segue to other areas, such as expropriation without compensation, prescribed assets, in other words, confiscating people's pensions, and of course, the national health insurance. I warned you guys. At least I know you guys know this. So let me bring it up to you guys as I look to conclude, because I'm sort of going on time. I did say 15 minutes, but let's make it 20 or maybe even 25. Because I want to see your comments, guys, and forgive me if I look in this direction. I think it's better to keep track of your comments over here. But yeah, like I really have, I'm quite interested. I know there's only about 259 of us on the feed. Guys, welcome to this short vlog. But I genuinely wanted to get a sense from you guys as to what you thought about tonight. Because I can tell you now, the politics that I've just described, that's exactly what you're going to see play out. And at the heart of it is the title of the show. Hashtag the ANC hates South Africans. It's now openly come to this realization itself as a party. And now what it is, it loves you just enough to exploit you. That's it. That's it. That's the long and the short of a description of the African National Congress in this country. It knows you enough to exploit you. It loves you enough, if I can call it that, just to exploit you. It doesn't really care about you. Excuse me. It doesn't really care. The ANC doesn't care about any of the values, for example, that I stand for. The idea of faith, flag, family, and freedom. It doesn't care about those kinds of things. Really? No. The ANC is literally here now to loot and fleece as much as it possibly can from you. Because here's another way. This is my last thought. Look at who's making these decisions and look at how little skin in the game they have. When you look at the average age of politicians, especially those in the ruling elite, these are guys who realistically won't be here in 15 years. Let's face it, these are guys who will not be here in 15 years. So what do they care about running massive deficits? What do they care? Because a lot of their kids, for instance, study overseas. Some of them probably have dual citizenship in other parts of the world. So really, what do they care about what they do in South Africa? If anything, as has been the case of African despots across the record of history, they will loot and fleece a country, and in most cases, as much as possible, transfer those funds overseas in nice offshore accounts, where the rest of us, through exchange controls, are forced to keep our money here, and to see it lose value and be eroded. Because remember, inflation is another form of taxation on you. But we'll cover that topic in another day. All right, I'm gonna keep an eye on the comments here, guys. Let's see here, let's see. Dane Wenzel, are we heading towards another Zimbabwe? Dude, in reality, for those who live in rural parts of this country, dog, it already is Zimbabwe in real terms. It already is Venezuela. I don't think we understand how dire the situation is in this country. South Africans, families, whole families, are now left in the cold, wholly dependent on government, wholly dependent on the state, a inept, corrupt, and kleptocratic state. Effectively, for that family, South Africa is no different to a Zimbabwe. South Africa is no different to a Venezuela. Anyway, I think I may have broken it for a moment, but I do think I'm back. Donovan Kutia, buy silver, dog. I'm with you on that. But again, that's another conversation for another day, sorry. Quinton Tilbrook, is there a legal way to impeach the president? Interesting question. One which perhaps I should put to some of the legal eagles. I might even do an episode on that next week sometime, or even this Sunday on Late Nights with Big Daddy Liberty. How about I bring some legal minds on the show, the likes of your Mark Oppenheimers, Martin van Staden, guys, who are quite strong on constitutional law issues. Hey, let's bring them on. Let me see. Maureen Brendel, did you ever think of how much a worldwide crowd of people that would depend on a common basic income would be influenced by a few influences? I think I get the gist of that question. I think the gist of your question is, the extent in which dependency creates. Sorry, maybe I didn't get that. Maybe you just want to quickly retype that. Let's see. Vernon Wilkes, can we remove this government? Yeah, of course we can. Of course we can. We have the tools. And look out for that, because I'm going to have a conversation with you guys on the show where I detail the how. I mean, I put up a tweet, I think a week ago, when people were all angry. Was it Monday or the week ago? When the booze ban came back, I put up a tweet saying, don't get angry, don't get mad, organize, organize. Use this opportunity to literally organize. And I'm going to detail in a conversation with you guys how exactly we can do that. Like, don't get angry. Don't just think it ends with a rant on social media and that's it. And that no one gets you. Trust me, people get you. You form part of a majority in this country that is literally needing just to be organized. Groundswell community organizing. But we'll talk about that. Do you think the virus is as bad as they say it is? I don't think so, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, there are people who are dying from this disease, virus, and there's clear markers by and large as to who they are. In fact, I'm in the risk group, if I'm to be brutally honest in that regard. People who have these sort of comorbidities. I only have one, which is hypertension. I'm cognizant of the data because there are people who are basically saying it doesn't exist, and I'm not sure that's 100% true. I think what we're seeing here is a very real virus, but one which is being used to scaremonger. That much has become now incredibly clear for me. The virus itself is very real, but the amount of scaremongering we're seeing is absolutely unwarranted because the mortality rate in this country is actually very low. And yeah, anyway, let me end that one there. Red Personally says, I feel that Cyril's NWO I feel that Cyril, NWO Ramaphosa, is tanking the economy in order for a larger power to buy us out and institute a full cashless control-based system. Possible? Dude, I don't like delving in the world of conspiracy. I like basing opinion based on data and facts. So to that statement, I would say, well, let's see what the data says. The data clearly shows us, and the trends clearly show us, a march towards a hard left in this country. It was soft initially, but now it's pronounced. And of course, there are foreign powers that, right? They're definitely friends with the Russians. They're definitely friends with the Chinese. I mean, look at who the president was celebrating in tweets recently. The likes of Iran and Venezuela, and basically all sorts of nations who represent a quite genuine axis of evil in this world. So insofar as that's concerned, of course they're in bed with nefarious characters. Of course they're in bed with people who are maybe even argue have an alternative agenda. People who at face value seem like really nice guys, right? And hey, maybe even philanthropic. But there's definitely a bit of an agenda behind what they're doing, and that's worth a conversation in and of itself. Thanks for that question. Red Personality or red. Let's see here. Guys, I'm going to end it soon. I didn't want it to be long. Sandy Lemsi, who can possibly benefit from scaring you or the South African people? Trust me, politicians. Politicians can put. You see, we've got to understand something about the politician. A politician by his very nature, it has two considerations. One, the acquisition of power at all costs, and two, the retention of power at all costs. Things like service delivery and being of service to people are incidental, if not secondary, or rather secondary, if not incidental. Politicians don't really give a flying fudge. And you see this, right? You see this. This is why when I began the stream, I basically said, if you look across the board in our politics, there is a scary lack of political diversity. And all it is different shades of the same stuff, different shades of fear us to a varying degree. The DA does the exact same thing. Do not fool yourself. Yes, some might argue, but the DA is a little better and this and that. The DA is just efficient at being the exact same nonsense that the ANC is, or similar nonsense. I shouldn't say exact same, but similar nonsense to what the ANC is. What do I mean by this? If you live in the city of Cape Town, and you're a resident, a middle class, upper middle class resident, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You are taxed to the hilt by the DA. Yes, you might argue, well, that at least there's services, right, as they often do. But I don't think those who are taxed as they do, in lieu of the promise of this tax money going into the sort of neighborhoods like Kaili, Chanyanga, etc., I don't think people who live in those parts of the world would argue that it genuinely is, the DA that is any different in real terms, to the ANC. It might be slightly more efficient. Yes, there may be running water. Yes, there may be electricity. But in real terms, I don't think there's a discernible difference. Outside of someone who maybe lives in Johannesburg or who lives in any other urban setting, there are, yes, better shades of efficiency, don't get me wrong, but in real terms, politically, in terms of a aspirational politics that is visionary, that says, hey, this is what we're here to do differently, I don't think the average citizen can discern a difference between the DA in terms of a vision and a different way of governing. It really is just a more efficient ANC, if I can say that with, and I say this, by the way, as someone who came from the DA, right? I say this as someone who came from the DA, and I've had the privilege, if I can call it that, of working in different roles when I was in that political party, including one of government, actually being in government. And I can tell you now, the facade of the DA being liberals or classical liberal is exactly that. It is a facade. A lot of these people are soft lefties, which is why they really hated me to a large extent, or there's pockets of that party that really didn't like me. Because here's this classical liberal basically arguing within the DA for things like, an adherence to the values, at least in my case, of a freedom society, of building a society which is property owning, broadly middle class, middle income, prosperous and non-racial, and you have elements in that part that really aren't interested in that, to be brutally honest. Anyway, let me move on. But the day will come where I have that conversation about the DA. The day will come, trust you me. All right, guys. Maybe 3 questions, and let's call it a night. Annie, Derbs here. Where were you living? Where were you at? Where were you at Loving Life live stream earlier, Big Daddy? That channel also rocks. Okay. I'm not sure what you're asking there, but I'm going to attempt to answer it 2 ways. Are you asking where have I been before you saw me on Loving Life? Or are you asking me where was I physically when I was interviewed on Loving Life? So to answer both, I've been around. I've been around even before Loving Life. And insofar as where I was when I was interviewed on Loving Life, because I'm trying to see if I'm answering either of those 2 questions, I'm still in Johannesburg. So right now I'm in Cape Town. Electoral reform in this country is sorely needed. We need to devolve power, and we need to bring that power down to the most local level possible. And direct elections are critical in that. Some of the electoral reforms I talk about is, for example, a return of constituency-based members of parliament. So in other words, not electing a party into government, but rather electing a member of parliament who represents your area. In other words, that member of parliament would be directly responsive and accountable, to you and the community, as opposed to getting their marching orders from a political party. If we had something like that in South Africa, you wouldn't have had something like Nkandla happen, for example. Why? Because people wouldn't have voted along party lines. Why? Because MPs, members of parliament, would have known that if they voted for that sort of shenanigans, they would have had to have gone back to their community to account for that. A community who would have said, screw you, we're voting you out. So of course you need direct elections in that regard, but it's just one of the electoral reforms that are required. You also need to, we need a lot of civic, we need to do a lot more work when it comes to civic responsibility and civic education. Teaching people what are your powers. Are you a subject or are you a citizen? Having people electoral reforms. Let's see. What is your response on UDIs or UDEs? No idea what that is. Is that an acronym for something like Open Opportunity Disastrous Economic Zuma Zuma? I don't know, dog. Like, let me know what that means. I have I have no idea what that means, man. I just made that up. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. I'm terrible. I can almost hear I can almost hear Nkosazana Buffalo Bill Kamini Zuma, but he's saying, "Oh, you must be on that Zol. What was that old days acronym?" Anyway, Sandile Bele, why must we continue to pay tax to these looters? Budi, that is a fantastic question. That is a fantastic question. Like, what is the basis of us really continuing? And by the way, can I quickly remind you of something? You don't pay taxes, Budi. You don't pay taxes. That money is taken from you. That money is taken from you by force. Because if we legit pay taxes, then I can show you, those of us who are fed up with this government would have stopped paying it quite a long time ago. But taxes are taken from you with the threat of violence behind them. Because I can tell you now, if I stop paying tax, what do you think will happen? There'll be men with guns at that door, knocking, saying, "Hey, Puti, you haven't paid taxes. Or you haven't given us an opportunity to take taxes from you." There'll be men at my door with guns. And what would happen? I would be at my door with my gun to defend my property. And what do you think happens to me in that situation? So it's a conversation we're going to have, but trust me, we'll have that conversation. Kgopulo Lloyd Makano, I'm sorry, but if I gave it too many khas, but Kgopulo, I'm sure that's how I pronounce your name. I'm really tired of the "we are led" brigade, a bunch of sheeple. They're so blinded by Leninism. Puti, you are 100% correct. You are 100% correct. And this is what I mean by that lack of diversity in our politics. But as I say that, we also need to get onto the ground, to do the groundwork, to change this society, And how do you do that? By injecting a greater volume of ideas into that society that is at a point of crisis in order to sway that society away from the Leninism, away from the Marxist ideas. So that's what I've now started to do. I've, as I said, I'm now in Cape Town. I'm no longer in Johannesburg. I gave up my flat. I moved out. I sold as much of my goods as I could to raise funds for this Liberty Bus tour, because the work now for Big Daddy Liberty is literally being in communities. Starting small, by the way, because I don't have a Messiah complex. I don't see myself building these millions of people who then follow me and I'm like, "Come on, everybody, let's march to the union buildings." I don't have those delusions of grandeur. But what I do have is a firm plan to just, if initially, to lay the seed in various communities. So whether I'm in a rural former homeland, I'm talking to small groups. It could be a Stockfell group, a small group who said, "Big Daddy, come, I'm going to get some mamas together, address us on these ideas you talk about." Whether it's in an informal settlement, a township, a leafy suburbia. Small groups to address them. What does liberty mean? And what sort of policies do I talk about when I talk about liberty? And how can I show you in practical terms what a liberty-oriented society looks like at a policy level? So let me take 3 areas in terms of how I describe it. I'll usually look at healthcare, safety and security, and education. What do liberty policies look like in those 3 areas? And if you like those ideas, stand behind them. You become the one who also joins me in that mission of spreading them into the community and literally building something where we basically elect, we create a culture, we create a political culture in this country where we make it profitable for any politician, even a bad politician, to do the right thing. That's what you really want. A citizenry with the right ideas who create a political culture where even bad politicians are incentivized politically to do the right thing. That's what you really do. And that's what the battle of ideas is about. That's why you'll never hear me say, "No, vote for this one, don't vote for that one," because that's all irrelevant. Unless you've worked on building the political culture of liberty. All right, guys, a few more questions. I'm seeing Lila Tov's coming up. People are literally going to bed here. Shout out to you, Reina. I see you, homie. Pumudzo Maberimisa. Pumuzo Mabirimi, so I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing that properly. No South African institution is willing to assist the taxi industry, says Pumuzo. All they do is talk about the taxi industry being unregulated by the government and non-tax paying. Can I be honest, Pumut? I don't think the taxi industry is actually really looking for help per se from the state in real terms. I think all they want is a solid legal framework in which they can work, and also fairness. So in other words, if they are able to operate on a day-to-day basis profitably without receiving a single subsidy from the state, then bus companies, train companies, and basically all other public transport should either have the same system, or as I propose, and as is proposed by the Institute of Race Relations in a recent report that they did, instead of giving the subsidy to the various modes of transport, train, bus, taxi, give it to the commuter. Right? Give it to the commuters, especially the poorer commuters, so that you can have a situation, for example, where, because not everybody needs it, right? But it's also the most efficient way of dispersing. If the government's going to spend this money, then spend it in a more efficient way by giving it directly to the commuter. So let's say a commuter spends on average 1,500 a month on public transport, and they have a preference for taxis. Then how about you give that commuter, again, I haven't done we haven't cost accounted this, but so I'm use hypothetical numbers here. How about you give them a subsidy of 50% of that to basically give them the freedom to choose whatever form of transport that they want. That way, you basically incentivize a system where the suppliers of transport literally provide what is required by the market, as opposed to what you have now, where we're seeing subsidies being pumped into buses, even with those subsidies currently, who still opt to use taxis. So why not subsidize the customer, the commuter, so that they're able to afford the sort of transport that they want? That's the one side. That's you dealing with the demand. I'm right, the demand. To deal with the supply and also help the taxi industry basically modernize and become a little less of a thuggish on the road industry, if you introduced a subsidy that basically allowed them to be able to attract more customers, then they wouldn't drive in the way in which they do, basically. And I know a lot of people don't understand what I'm saying right now. Do yourself a favor. On my YouTube channel, look for the Taxiland miniseries that I did, the 3-part miniseries, the Taxiland miniseries, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of the reasons why taxi drivers drive like trash on the road is because they're trying to meet a daily target, which is incredibly difficult to meet. So they hustle and bustle like that because they're also competing. There's unfair competition from buses and trains, which are subsidized. And those buses and trains don't have to operate like taxis do to try and meet daily targets, try and meet demand. Why? Because they're subsidized. So whether they do badly or not, they don't care. So they don't drive like absolute animals on the road. But the taxi guys don't have that luxury. They literally they operate on a free market basis where literally if you don't do what is required, you don't make ends meet at the end of the day. So I'm arguing simply, and this is not the platform for that, and I apologize to those who are feeling a bit bored. Basically, all I'm arguing is rather give the subsidy to the commuter, and that which will basically reduce a lot of the pressure in, even in the taxi sector, and you'll see better behavior. If I'm to be brutally honest, if we did this, but whole conversation you can find on that 3-part miniseries. All right, guys. Let me wrap it up here. Maybe one more question. Gareth H, you're the last name I see on here. Do you have any genuine hope? And if so, over what time term? Oh, dude, that's a tough one because generally speaking, I'm a hopeful person generally, and I'm a positive person generally. I'm rooted in my faith, which literally injects that positivity in me. I mean, I'm the sort of person who prays 3 times a day, man. Yeah, I'm a person who prays. I'm a person who prays 3 times a day. As I say on social media, I'm based in that regard. So a lot of the hope I have for this country is rooted in that. But I'm also realistic and I'm also pragmatic. And if I'm to stay hopeful and if I'm to continue trying to spread that hope onto people, it mustn't be, I don't want to be a prophet of false hope to people. I don't want to be like a politician in that regard. What I want to be able to do is provide the data, the solid analysis, and the sound argument to you, the person who listens to me, so that you're able to make decisions based on the reality on the ground. And to do that right now, and to answer your question, I'm still hopeful, but that hope is based on what I do and what I inspire other people to try and do when I talk about, for example, the groundwork and the battle of ideas. So my hope is hinged completely on my attempts to win the battle of ideas. If I start losing that battle, then I can tell you now that the answer would be no, I'm not hopeful. But right now, I am hopeful because even as I travel across this country, South Africans from all walks are coming up to me and saying, hey man, we watch your show, we're inspired, we're talking to so-and-so, spreading these ideas, we want to hear more. And it isn't just the white South Africans, because I can tell you now, there's a lot of that on social media, and that's done on purpose, by the way, by some people. They want to typecast you, right? The moment you speak out in this country, you can bet your bottom dollar the Blavity Blacks and the social justice warrior whites will come out and try and typecast you. So, the SJW whites will say something like, oh, you just don't understand your oppression. You should be supporting the ANC and the supporting. I have no idea whether I'm still on. I think I'm back. Excuse me. So I was basically saying before I got frozen, you have these two groupings who will, from their different perspectives, try and discourage any South African who tries to push back against the system, who tries to inject hope, and who tries to basically steer a society away from the nonsense that we're going in right now. So I'm not blind to that, but I am hopeful. This is my country, this is your country, and it is literally up to us to fight for it. No one's coming to save us. There is no there's no Messiah, who's coming to save us in the here and now, unlike the actual Mashiach. But in any event, the point I'm making is it really is up to us, and you've got to get involved in the battle of ideas. You've got to get involved in the groundwork of organizing. Organize in your sector, organize in your community, organize in your workplace. Rally people around the sort of ideas that build a society, and then from that basis, from that consensus, stand together against the gaggle of politicians, the gaggle of the political elites in this country who seek to destroy this nation. That is the simple way in which you do it. I am playing my part, and I'll bring you every minute of that as much as I possibly can on the Big Daddy Liberty Show. As I begin to go into communities, as I begin to stand with various South Africans who are drawing the line in the sand, I will bring you as much of that as I can on the show. But I must end it here and remind you, as the title of this video was, the first inklings of wisdom politically is realizing that politicians in this country actually don't have much in the way of respect for you. The ANC literally hates South Africans, but it doesn't end there. You've then got to do something about that. You've got to organize South Africans and respond effectively to these politicians. And there's ways to do that. We'll have that conversation. But tonight is not that night for that conversation. I really wanted to get your sense of what you guys thought of the speech. And I can see from the comments that you guys were not feeling it, and I don't blame you. But it is us here. It is us, it is up to us, oh goodness, must be getting late, drawing the line in the sand and fighting back. It shouldn't end here. It shouldn't end with us sort of ranting and raving every now and then, and there's definitely plans afoot to do that. There's a lot of stuff that I'm working on. There's a lot of moving parts in the Big Daddy Liberty world that I'm moving on, and you guys will find out very soon what's coming the way of politicians. Help me scare them. Help me scare them Hashtag stand with BDL. And on that note, guys, let me say good night. Remember, you can support the BDL mission. I'm now on the Liberty Tour. I'm on the road. And it is you guys who are literally supporting me. Remember, Patreon, I will give other ways to donate. Patreon, PayPal is also now available. And I'll try and link those descriptors. I'm working on a website that I'll have all this information on. Thank you to you guys who donate on Patreon. You're the ones who are helping me put all this stuff together, to be able to afford to put all of this stuff together. So shout out to you guys for doing that. And thank you guys so much. Hey man, have a fantastic evening. And yeah, as I always say, remember, never trust a commie.